we're going to come up with new economies. We're going to come up with new technologies, but not new technologies meaning here's some more high tech that I can make $1 billion off of. But here's a new technology that works for people on the ground. That means that people who are suffering right now don't have to suffer. I am not talking about and kind of airy-fairy, everybody has everything equally. I think that was the mistake that the communists made. I'm talking about a world that people will still be struggling and sacrificing, etc. But I'm talking about a world that where if you ask a person, if you ask the rice farmer, does the world work for you? They're going to say yes. You know, I'd like to get a higher yield on my crop. I'd like to be able to buy a motor scooter or something like that. But the world basically works for me. And if you ask the person who's the head of the Fortune 500 company and everybody in that company, does the world work for you? Everybody along the line will say, yes, this basically works for me. I believe that it's possible to get there, but I don't believe it's possible to get there without some difficulty, without some changes that from the point of view of those who think they have something to lose will look like sacrifice. And I say, so be it. You know, those changes will have to happen or the entire boat goes down. So what are we going to do? Are we going to make the changes, or are we going to continue to grip and grasp onto my little portion in order to say this is mine? There's this really this program that came on years and years ago, a television show that involved rescuing this little girl whose hand was stuck in a mailbox. And so she was like 7 or 8 years old, and she's sitting there and she's crying and her hand's stuck in the mailbox, and the rescuers come out and they're like, well, can we dismantle the mailbox? Well, no, we can't do that. Well, can we cut it open? It's like, well, the welding would burn her skin before we would get it. And they're like, and she's just crying. And then finally somebody realized she got her hand in the box. How come she can't get her hand out of the box? And they said, you know, how come your hand won't come out of this box? And she says, well, I'm holding on to my candy bar. I dropped my candy bar in the box. I was playing with the box, and I put my candy bar in it. I dropped my candy bar in the box. I got a hold of the candy bar, but I can't get my hand in the candy bar of the box. They said, drop the candy bar. And she says, well, I want my candy bar. And he says, well, I'll buy you another one. He said, okay. And so most of us are holding on to the candy bar. Most of us are holding on to this stuff that will not work in a world that works for all. I'm inviting all of us to let go of the candy bar. It doesn't mean that you're going to get another candy bar if you take your hand out. It may mean you're going to get something a lot more satisfying than a candy bar. And so I believe that we can let go. I believe that we can make this kind of a shift. But I believe that we have to understand how important it is that we do that. Okay, in order for us to drop the candy bar, to get our hand out of the box, we have to understand the nature of this candy bar. Now, everybody's candy bar looks a little bit different, but it all boils around this concept of, am I satisfied? Am I fulfilled in the world? Am I fulfilled in life? Most of us in this society, in American society, are taught your fulfillment comes from having stuff. The more stuff you have, the more fulfilled you are. The more stuff you have in your bank account called dollars, the happier you should be. The bigger your car, the happier you should be. And all of that is a lie. It's a lie that gets you to buy a whole bunch of candy bars. Okay, but what we're finding now is that we can't maintain a society that works for anybody with those kind of candy bars floating around. And so what we have to do is look at what is it that satisfies me? What is it that fulfills me? If I know how to be fulfilled, I don't have to constantly get more and more and more. I can have enough. Now, the enoughness concept, the enoughness movement was highlighted by a friend of mine, Vicki Robin, who wrote a book, Your Money or Your Life. And that book deals with the concept of voluntary simplicity, that one can voluntarily ratchet down the busyness in their lives to something that will work for them in their lives and be very satisfying, but also can be very satisfying for the earth. And so in this concept of enoughness, there are two other amounts. There is enough for me and my family. Then there is not enough. And not enough means that you can't live any kind of a decent life without making really bad choices. This is a concept I know really well because growing up in Camden, New Jersey, we did not have enough. We had not enough. The welfare system is an immoral system because the welfare system forces the people on welfare to make immoral choices, to make a choice that no human being should have to make. So my mother's choice was she got enough money to feed her children, but she didn't have enough money to keep a roof over their heads. Or she could spend the money to keep a roof over their heads but watch her children starve. Or she could take the money from the welfare bureau and she could slip around and illegally work on the side so that she would then have enough money for the roof and the food. No human being on this planet should be forced into that kind of a decision. No human being should be forced to work in, for example, a nuclear power plant because that's the only job that's available that will feed my family. No girl or boy should be forced into prostitution because that's the only way to feed my family. And unfortunately, many of us, and I would even bet most of us on this planet, are making those choices all the time. So we have enough, we have this amount that's not enough, and then we have another amount that's called more than enough. And more than enough is the amount that is more than all of your reasonable wants and needs and wishes. And when you get to more than enough, you start making the same kinds of immoral choices that you make when you have not enough. And so you start looking at what people who acquire more than enough spend their money on. Some of us are wise enough to say, I am now in a position to be of service to others. And they're the ones that found the family foundations. They're the ones that where they can become philanthropists. They're the ones that will say, someone else helped me to get here, so I'm going to reach behind me and I'm going to help someone else get to this point too. I'm going to use my resources for that. And this is after I've taken care of my family's wants, needs, and wishes. Many others of us, though, say, oh, this means I can have all the cocaine I can snort. I can buy all the expensive prostitutes. I can live a wasteful, extravagant, ridiculous life. And because this ridiculous life is held up as a paragon of virtue in this society, I can start trying to feel good about myself.